Comrades and friends, are you ready? Yes, yeah. Hanzi kuti vharira. Hanzi kuti vharira ku. Mira ndichage. Mira. Zawanda mutkane.
He's a journalist. Yeah, being a journalist and Ford Ranger iripanze apa red. Hanzi yakaita double parking is blocking traffic. Whoever has got a red Ford truck, please attend to it. Being a journalist in a Ford Ranger red Pajab, please attend to your car. It's double parked, blocking other traffic. Diane? I'm sure I will. Yeah, red.
Bueno, opa. Oh, asaka chakadhakwe.
under the National Citizen Assembly to look into the crisis that is bedeviling our country and come up with a sustainable way forward and resolution. We believe as citizens, as the citizens movement, we believe without doubt that the election on the 23rd of August 2023 does not reflect the true will of the Zimbabwean people. The election was flawed. The entire process was shambolic and illegal. We have emerged out of this crisis as a people because of the failure of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to hold a free, fair, and credible election. All the stakeholders that have observed this election have condemned the Zimbabwean election, the pre-electoral environment, the election itself, and the post-electoral environment that we are in today. This election failed by all standards to meet the requirements of the law of our country, which is the Electoral Act and the Zimbabwean Constitution read together. It failed to meet the standards as articulated by SADC, the African Union, the European Union, and all the observers that were observing this election. We know as a movement that thousands of voters were disenfranchised by the illegal vehicle that was used by ZANU-PF called the Forever Association of Zimbabwe, which was stationed all over the polling station in the country, particularly in the countryside. Thousands of polling stations were manned by these individuals, were intimidating, harassing, and coercing Zimbabweans to vote for a particular political party. Our supporters, our members were intimidated, were harassed. One of our members of parliament candidates here in Harare was actually arrested on course of his campaign, signifying and signaling without doubt how fraudulent, illegal, coercive this election was. The main of manipulation included the following areas. Number one, harvest of fear. Number two, intimidation. You know, the greatest scandal in the history of elections in this country was the opening time of polling stations, particularly in Harare, in Manicaland, and in Bulawayo. A deliberate voter suppression of the urban vote, leading to low turnout, leading to an outcome that does not reflect the true will of the Zimbabwean people. Some voters were thrown out of their polling stations by a flawed delimitation process, which had the effect dramatically suppressing turnout in urban areas. Most of the people who went to the polling stations discovered that their names were not there in their traditional polling stations. That deliberately suppressed the urban vote, deliberately skewed the election in favor of ZANU-PF. In the lead up to the election, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission also broke the law by not providing the voters' roll. Law enforcement consistently weaponized Maintenance and Order Act against the opposition to deny our members, to deny our party the freedom to assembly, the freedom to gather, and the freedom of choice. Majority of our meetings, particularly in the countryside, were stopped, interfered with, even if we had given a clearance by the police in line with the laws of our country. After the election day, there were serious challenges on the tabulation of the votes, including the widespread reports about agents being illegally recalled to polling stations and adjustment of V11s and V23s across the country, and the urban areas were not spared from this chicanery. The administration of these elections disenfranchised and ranged Zimbabweans across the country who deserve better and demand better. The biggest question is, what have we done as a movement to address this crisis? We have mounted extraordinary effort to restore legitimacy to the election results by doing what no opposition party should be doing, because that is the primary responsibility of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, which has the honors to announce results and to back up the results that they've provided to the Zimbabwean people. Thousands of our volunteers and supporters have risked violence and gone extraordinary strength and personal expense to collect and return original copies of the V11s across the country, each of them willing to pay the price for the safety of making sure that we have our own parallel voter tabulation, which reflects the will of the people. We know that hundreds and thousands could not make it because of these barriers that we've articulated. What do we do to resolve this crisis? That is the biggest question, fellow Zimbabweans. It is clear, it is non-negotiable that we cannot settle for any leader in Zimbabwe who lacks the true democratic will of the Zimbabwean people. A leader must be born out of a legitimate electoral process, because that is what democracy and election is all about. This election as it stands was an election without democracy, dominated by the menu of manipulation that I've just articulated. A true democratic mandate can only be derived from freely expressing Zimbabweans through the power of the ballot. And therefore, any president that must be inaugurated must be born out of a free, fair, and credible election. Therefore, the only resolution and way forward articulated by CCC for avoidance of doubt and confusion is that Zimbabwe needs a fresh and broad and proper election to exit the current crisis. A flawed electoral process has fully obscured the will of the Zimbabwean people, and there is no alternative outside a new, clean, fresh, and a proper election. Only that can give Zimbabwe an exit out of the vicious cycles of disputed election that have been dominating our party politic since 1980. Fellow Zimbabweans, every Zimbabwean, no matter whom they support, has an absolute and sacred and sovereign right to know that the government which taxes them, the government which polices them, which commands their military and manages the affairs of their state, is chosen freely, equally by all Zimbabwean people. In the current political crisis, the only way this sacred right can be fulfilled, the only way we can resolve the current predicament that we're facing as a people, the Citizens Coalition for Change, as led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa, has assessed the situation and has made this following clear and emphatic demand: that to exit and restore democracy and legitimacy in our country, we are going to settle for less, none other than a free, fair, credible, and a proper election in our country. Now, the biggest question that faces Zimbabwean society right now is, how do we achieve this desired end? How do we, to put it differently, restore legitimacy in our country? Our answer to all Zimbabweans and Africans at large, the solution lies in calling upon our African brothers and those in the region, particularly SADC, the African Union, to help us to facilitate, to mediate, to scaffold, and more importantly, to guarantee a process that will lead our return to legitimacy in the shortest period of time. Fellow Zimbabweans, this is our position as the Citizens Coalition for Change. And if there are any few questions, I'll take a few questions before we proceed. Thank you.
Sorry. I just want to understand, are you
and SADC to do something and nothing else? Is that your solution?
We have made it very clear, thank you for that question, that Zimbabwe faces a legitimate question. And the solution to resolve that crisis is that Zimbabwe must be able to go back to the road to democracy and legitimacy. But to do so, we must ensure that we sit down and scaffold a process by SADC, by the African Union, that guarantees Zimbabwe to have a free, fair, and credible election. So this election that we're just coming from was a flawed process in its entirety for avoidance of doubt. And the solution, to put it very clear, is to have a fresh, free, fair, and credible election. Thank you very much.
Does it mean that you are abandoning the agenda of putting ZEC on the line, demanding a recount of the election of the votes? There's also been talk of you taking ZEC to the courts.
The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission failed in the following respect. Number one, it failed the credibility test. Number two, it failed the transparency test. Number three, it fails the professional test. And therefore, ZEC failed its fidelity to the Zimbabwean constitution, and ZEC must be disbanded. And a credible player, a professional player, scaffolded by regional and international players, is the only way to have a free, fair, and credible election in this country.
Does it mean you are no longer engaging ZEC going forward?
ZEC has failed this mandate. Zimbabweans understand that. That decision, that call does not come only from CCC. ZEC was caught in flagrante delicto, undermining its responsibility and its fidelity from the constitution. Zimbabweans across the political divide have this particular consensus, have the conversation with members of the church, talk to the clergy, have conversation with members of the civil society, whose facilitation of having a parallel voter tabulation, despite the commitment by ZEC, had their offices being raided. So that is a sign that Zimbabweans across walks of life have this consensus at this particular moment. Go and talk to other political parties. And that's why we've said we have to make sure that as Zimbabweans, not just CCC, but as Zimbabweans, we must make sure that a new and fresh process can give a mandate. Because for the past years, Zimbabwe has been moving with a disputed state, with a contested state. And that's why you see all the social and economic crises that have been delving around because of a contested leadership.
What happens when CCC MPs like yourself were elected? Are you not going to accept the results as well, or this is only applying for the presidential?
We have made it very clear that the entire election in this country was flawed. The entire election in this country was illegal. The entire election in this country, I'm not so sure which language should I use to put it unequivocally, that the election in this country was flawed in its entirety and in total, and CCC has rejected the election, and the solution is holding a new, fresh, and proper election in this country. The course that we are going to take is a collective course that does not only include CCC, that is including every player which was affected. You know that some of the candidates to other parties were not allowed to participate. You know of the presidential, one of the presidential candidates, Xavier Kasukwere. His name was not on the ballot. That's why we have said the flawedness of the process is not only on the announcement of the results. It is on the pre-electoral cycle, during the election, and post the election. We are going to employ all the necessary measures at the right time that answers our roadmap. What we have articulated and resolved right now for avoidance of doubt is that CCC, number one, rejects the election in total. Number two, CCC as a movement is very clear that the solution from this crisis is a process that is scaffolded, guaranteed by SADC and the African Union that will lead us into a genuine, free, fair, and proper election.
In the event that what you're vying for fails, what are you going to do?
I don't know if you're a prophet, but we'll deal with it as we go. Yes. I don't know what way is the rerun coming from. We have said there must be.
You want another election, and what if Zanu-PF refuses to go for another election?
They will always refuse. They have their party, and I'm sure you have access to that party. I don't speak on behalf of ZANU-PF. I speak on behalf of the dejected masses of our people, the oppressed. That is what CCC represents. We are not worried about the interests of other players. We are worried about the interest of Zimbabwean people, the ordinary people whose will was stolen in this particular election. Yes, Ruben.
How do you get SADC and Africa Union to meet when Zimbabwe says it's a
Are you
sovereign
going to
country?
court?
What is your appetite with the legal rules, my brother? We have said our position as a movement that we said we need a new, fresh, and proper election in this country, whose process is scaffolded by SADC, by the African Union, and all the interested parties in the democracy of our country. Yes, Rutendo?
I was saying, how do you get SADC and AU to mediate in this crisis and call for a fresh election when Zimbabwe says it's a sovereign country? And question number 2, have you already communicated with SADC and African Union, or this is just your position as a party?
Look, I'm sure Rutendo is a student of international relations. You understand that Zimbabwe does not work in isolation. It exists. And I'm sure that our friends in ZANU-PF understand that very well. And that the mantra, Zimbabwe has been isolated from the international community, thanks to exhausted political rhetoric that has caused problems and suffering for our people. What we need right now is not further isolation of our country. We need to make sure that we engage with our friends and brothers in the region. Zimbabwe is a burden to South Africa. Zimbabwe is a burden to different countries in the world. What we must do is to sit down as Zimbabweans, make sure that we resolve our domestic problem, but we have to have our friends. SADC is mandated, and I'm sure you understand that its creation and its responsibility is helping Zimbabweans, helping member states to resolve such political crisis, because we have to have a sustainable solution to the trouble that is bedeviling our country.
Are you going to court? We have seen circulation of papers circulating, attempting like going to go to the court to challenge the presidential vote. In a very clear terms, are you going to court to challenge the presidential vote, or you are abandoning that vote?
Thank you very much. CCC is very clear in terms of its resolution. The resolution of the Citizens Coalition for Changes, led by African Nelson and Chamisa, is that the election in Zimbabwe was flawed, and the election must be the only route to resolve the crisis in this country. How do we go there to restore legitimacy in our country? We must make sure that a new, fresh, and a credible election is brought in, and it must be scaffolded by SADC, guaranteed by SADC and the African Union and other critical players, because it takes two to tango. ZANU-PF cannot run this country alone. It takes two to tango. We must make sure that we bring every Zimbabwean. And our process, my brother, so that we don't put the cart before the horse, it will include a lot of conversation with the Zimbabweans domestically. You are going to see us engaging with members of the church. You are going to see us engaging with other political parties. You are going to see us engaging with regional and international players. I'm sure you are conscious that SADC has deployed a team here in Zimbabwe, and we're going to be engaging with different players so that we resolve the crisis of legitimacy. And that crisis is born out of a stolen election. And the solution in this country lies nowhere than making a free and having a credible election in this country.
Are you worried? Are you not worried that South Africa president has congratulated President Emerson Mnangagwa for his win? In Namibia, the president there has also followed suit, and these are the key players of SADC. And you are here telling us that you are going to engage SADC, which is already congratulating President Emerson Mnangagwa for his win.
Thank you very much. I'm not so sure if you understand geopolitics and the influence of certain parties in the regional body, because it is very clear, my brother Blessing, a congratulatory message, a WhatsApp message, or a Twitter message does not define domestic and international politics. Domestic and international politics is defined by an election, is defined by the constitution of our country, is defined by rules and regulations that govern SADC. And it is those rules and regulations by SADC and us as member states that compel us to have those particular conversations with different players in the region. Members of the 40 states.
One more.
Thank you. We have that one more from SFAT, and we're done. Thank you very much.
Okay. You're speaking for yourself. You were elected and declared a member of parliament in this election. Do you accept that declaration? Are you going to accept being a member of parliament?
Thank you very much. I'm sure you understand that I'm not here to speak on my own behalf. I speak on behalf of the Citizens Coalition for Change, and the dejected masses of our people, millions that voted for the alternative and that expect change, and their will was bastardized. And those Zimbabweans want a free, fair, and fresh election whose solution is going to guarantee a long and lasting solution to the crisis that is bedening our country. We want that to happen in the shortest period of time. Thank you very much. Have a
Are
good
you
day.
privy to why Kikwete is around? Kikwete is in the country. Are you privy to why he's
Yes or no?